Jay, I don't know if you can hear us, but we're unable to hear you at the moment. Josh, is that true? You can't hear him either? Hi.
Is that a little bit better?
Yep, now I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
You just got to speak up a little bit.
Okay. So my first Rotary experience was in Illinois, probably a little more than 15 years ago, and a friend from the company I worked for invited me to a new club.
This way a little bit so that people on Zoom can see you.
2 more seconds are gone. And there was a new club forming, and it met after work hours, which was convenient. But and I joined for probably about 3 years, and it was a great, interesting group of people, but they were all retired. And that was kind of, it was, I can't remember quite the name of it, but that was kind of the impetus of it. But it was a great introduction, and we lived in a university community, and there were a lot of international people. So that was very exciting. And then when I moved to Boulder, it was our Superior and work in Boulder, it was like, oh, how can I get acquainted? And I thought the people that like to volunteer like I do would be in Rotary. And so I looked things up on the web, and I visited. Time in particular, like a lot of us, the morning club before going into work was perfect. And Alta Drum was my sponsor, and I joined 13 and a half years ago. So I feel like I've been here a long time. I've been secretary, I've been on the board. This is my 3rd time. And I was on the grants committee and grants chair, and now I'm literacy award chair. So I'm hoping I'm settling down. Sunset here. And so it's really been a great way to get involved in the community. I think that's what a lot of people find with like-minded people.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcia. She donated up, as all good Rotarians do. All right. Well, so do we have any guests today? I see one guest right here. Do you want to introduce your guest?
Yes. I want to be here because Josh, are you there?
Yeah, he's on there.
It's Ann.
No, there's no Josh on there.
He's not there?
Yeah, he is.
Oh, is he?
Oh, yeah. Our Rotaract. Josh is a guest. I met
There
him.
he is.
Okay. I met Josh at the Be Involved Fair. He's a Rotaract, and he's on the special events committee. I chair, I guess, with Rotaract, and he's very good at special events. They got 8 pages of people who are interested in Rotaract, and live we have Paulette Foss, who is a Spellbinders, and during our happy moment, she's going to tell you a 2-minute story, something like that, because I thought you would enjoy her. And her friend there is Clive, her guide dog.
And you can pet him if he can get his nose off the ground. There's too many smells in this building.
Well, thank you. Any other guests today? Joanne?
And Ginger has returned.
Oh, Dan. All right, and we got one more guest over here. John, you want to say that real quick and tell people who haven't met you yet?
Sure. Yes, I guess it's my 4th meeting, and I've got an application and meeting some people and stuff. So yeah, John Stringfellow, nice to meet everybody there.
And then in the back, Peanut Gallery got Norris, so everyone knows Norris. All right, wonderful. Well, I'm going to keep standing further away because I think it might help the audio a little bit. All right, so as far as events go, we've got our Club Literacy Award winners. We'll have them come and speak this month. So no one today, but Debbie Hussman, she's a teacher who's worked with students, professionals, and adults, and she was one of our Literacy Award winners. So we'll have an opportunity to provide that award this month, and then also Marisol from Generation Exchange. So super exciting that we have those Literacy Award winners this month. Additional monthly updates would be community service updates. We're getting very close to Habitat. Joe, do we have a head count yet?
Last I heard from Pam, we had about 8 people signed up, so we should be really close.
Awesome, wonderful. So if you're still available or planning to and have not, email Joe, but also you can go back to the email that has the information to get to sign up in 2 different locations. One for day of service and one for Habitat. And then also we have the Isabel Road cleanup on the 25th. So if you haven't emailed Joe about that yet, that's coming up. We've got a few weeks, but definitely get it on your calendars. Wonderful, thanks. All right, couple district announcements. These are all oldies but goodies. So Woo Humanity Bike Ride. We also just had the Greenhouse Scholars event. How did that go? Did it? It was great. I mean, the miles is good. Awesome. Wonderful. Well, I'm glad to hear
Some
it.
of the women, the bike riders do the same thing that normal bike riders do, is they veer over that white line, which is a little scary on the highway, but you know, it's them, not me.
Well, I'm glad everyone's okay. The next bike event is going to be in a few weeks. So just want to point that out. On the same weekend, we have the Rockies game for Polio Plus. That's against the Giants. And then finally, almost a year out, we have the International Convention in Houston. So the travel is going to be a bit easier than Taipei. Also, the weather should be about exactly the same. All right, so it is a moment for Happy Bucks. For those who are new to Happy Bucks, it's a time where you get to donate some money towards something that the club will support. This month we don't have a designated support, so we may do it based on like an emergency, such as a hurricane or an earthquake. Could be an organization or community we really care about, but you have an opportunity to put a couple bucks and say something to the club. So I see Lou on this corner, so we'll start on this side and work our way around.
Put $5 in. My son had his surgery on Monday. The kidney kicked right in, so hopefully by Friday he'll be out of the hospital and back home for a long period of time. He used to say he's compromised and he's going to be sequestered in his home for probably the next 6 months.
Well, I got a flag spot because it's September 1st, which means we've made it calendar year 2/3 of the way through, which gives you like a 666 batting average, which is phenomenal.
So I'll do a flag spot too, and my little granddaughter has just started to make inroads on walking.
How old is she?
Just turning 9 months.
She's a first child, isn't she?
I've got money somewhere here. Just saying that my heart is with the people in the Orleans.
Just glad to be here with everyone.
Yeah, I'm putting a little more in than usual. As some of you are aware, there's some of you are not, but the end of 2015, I was diagnosed with a rare aggressive cancer. And so half of 2016 was spent in chemo treatments and radiation. Well, as of this past Monday, I am 5 years cancer. Please watch them. And this is for my daughter who just adopted her first child. Who tomorrow will be 3 weeks old.
A couple of things. First of all, thank you, Leslie. This is a bar. And I'm so happy about the Sanger Home that's going on in Broomfield. But when I heard the names of the soldiers that were killed, I taught in Los Altos High School, and one of those boys is from Los Altos. Not that I knew him, but it just, I went to tell Rich and I lost it. It's just not hard. You just got something else. So anyway, very sad.
So I'm putting in a IOU, really get some change for Bob.
I think it says 100 at the top.
No, it's not.
It's very close.
And I'm happy that I finally got Paulette to come to a meeting with Clyde. So she's got 2 minutes to tell you a story or something like that, right?
And I have a little bit of cash to put in.
Thanks, Paulette.
Yeah.
If you want to stand up here, you can talk to the crowd on Zoom
Can
too.
I unmask?
Yes, to speak, you should definitely.
This is a story about how you look at the world. And I'm betting I can tell how all of you Rotarians do. But there was a guy swamping down the road and he looks at the farmer over there and says, "What's the next town like?" And the farmer said, "Well, things are pretty much alike around here.
How did you find the last time? Horrid. I came into town and this dog was attacking me and I picked up a rock to make it go away, and all those raggedy children in the street, they were coming after me with their soccer balls and everything. And as I walked past the top, all those workmen sitting there drinking beer, and I had to run out of the town. Well, said the farmer, I think you'll find it pretty much the same in the next town. A while later, another man came trotting down the street and says, afternoon. He says, what's the next town like? And the farmer said the same thing. Well, was the last one? He said, oh, I had the best time. There was this cute little puppy. He had this huge voice. He was barking at me, and I picked him up and played with him. And then the boys, when a soccer ball came and I kicked it back, I got to play with the boys for so, oh God, they were so quick. We played, and then as I walked by, the guys sitting there after work drinking their beers offered me one. Oh, I needed it after the game. Anyway, I stopped to wave at the ladies growing their gardens, and I really didn't want to leave, but I can't stay there. There's no place to stay. What's the next village like? Farmer says, I think you will get what you're looking for. And I think it's true of the Rotarians, who are all the guy out there with the puppy and the soccer.
Thank you, Paula. That was really wonderful.
Thank you.
By the way, she's a spellbinder. That's why she did that.
Oh, Rusty, you're up. All right.
Just wanted to report, all my friends and relatives are fine in Louisiana, didn't get affected by the hurricane. It was all on the New Orleans side, unfortunately for those guys. But about half the state is without electricity, and at this time of year, no electricity means no air conditioning.
Yeah, right.
That's almost as bad as being in the hurricane itself, because they're predicting weeks without electricity.
Well, a happy Buck welcome to my little place of work. Unfortunately, after the meeting is when they're really cleaning down in the adoption area. So, the dogs have been locked up for, 12 hours. So some of them, it's kind of a mess down there until they get it all cleaned up. And then we've been opening at 1, which is a couple hours later because of training some new team members. But starting next Wednesday, we'll be opening at 11. So I hope everybody wants to, come back when we're open.
Wonderful. Thank you, Leslie. And I'll throw in another 20 happy bucks because I used to live in New Orleans as well, and I lived through hurricanes there, and it was something. And I'll tell you, the air conditioning is one thing, but losing your freezer and refrigerator is another thing. And so that's why we have hurricane parties, because everyone all gets in the one house together, they bring their freezer over one day at a time, and then we all eat through someone's freezer every day, and sometimes it's not good food. We'll just be honest.
Just an announcement over on the counter over there, I do have extra jam and peach vinegar and the 3 different flavors of jam. If anybody's interested.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lou. All right, well, we're on to our program, but I do not see our speaker yet. So
It'll show up about 7:45.
7:45 and 7:46, so hopefully it'll be in a moment. Well, with that, I think we have a minute of social to make up for the lack of us going over our social minute before. So if you guys want to socialize for a minute, that's absolutely fine. Catch up.
Who's on Zoom today? We have Ann's friend Josh, the guy from Rotary, and Angie's on, and Dave Turner. Thank you.
Well, it's a perfect time for everyone to silence their phones, so speakers. Thank you, Lou.
Money for peaches? Yes, I will still take money for.
Lou, you don't have to. 'Cause we know.
Yeah, I have that
You
too.
got
Bob,
stuff.
I told him I'd give it to you.
Yep, no levy bucks at all.
Oh, geez, I think
One on the west side of town. Water just came over the top, but it didn't. Yeah. Yeah, too bad we couldn't spend that on education and roads. They won't give you money. Yeah, it was, so much work. Corps of Engineers really memorized all that. They built the for like 10 miles. Water didn't get that high and that wall did not. They were worried that it would wash out underneath it. But it didn't. Well, yes. But the pumps are
The spots
the
were
ones in town, down near the French Quarter. 6 feet across and a couple of them.
So you're up if you believe it. You guys you don't have it there? I made this slide for you. So. Okay, I didn't see it this morning, so I'll pull it up.
Okay.
Can I just do a brief introduction sitting down?
Yeah.
No, I do not remember.
I wonder if we just.
Oh, that's right, there's a word window.
Yes, yes. What's it gonna be like? Not too bad because we're on the biggest range southeast side. So, 34 inches, usually it's not even a big thunderstorm. Went over about a 24-hour period. All the ditches fill up, the low-lying roads get a couple inches of water. It just adds to the humidity. I know. Yeah, it's really hard to believe that 1,000 years people live there. We can't even imagine. When I went to school, all through my years, other schools there. We didn't get a house until I think I was about 8th grade. It was hot and humid. Yeah. And of course, the teachers used to turn the fans off because they were too loud. And so, you know, we would have fan time. So we had to be quiet or do homework or something, turn the fans back on.
Where'd you grow up? Because at Madison, they're only like pretty thing about Madison College.
I think there's somebody for that show up. Terry messed the whole Terry.
No, it's adding a third.
There you go.
There we see.
My wife had her computer hacked about 2 weeks ago. It sent out emails to all kinds of people. Sheets last night was still working on it. Had some guy come over. Messed up her whole system. They're not all stored in the email list, but put a bunch of stuff on her. And she's still fighting. We'll do something. Screen will show up. It's not her. That's scary.
Yesterday, I got an email.
All right, everyone. Terry, you want to do some announcements for us? Hey, everyone, we got everything working again. Have your fire stations on. Terry, got a quick announcement to our program.
So I'm aware that some people that ordered peaches and didn't pick them up for some odd reason, didn't know to pick them up, that if you have any of those customers, then they would like to just donate the money already given to the foundation, let me know, because I'm sending out letters for those specific that had outright donations and no product. So email me with names and addresses, because I don't know who those people were, except the 3 I wrote letters up this morning. So, thank you. I'm the foundation treasurer, in case you didn't know.
All right, Bill, come up and introduce our speaker.
I think I'll just do it here instead of navigating. So our speaker today is Allison Billing. She is the Executive Director of Impact on Education and has 20 years of experience leading nonprofits that improve communities. At Impact on Education since 2018, Allison is responsible for directing organizational strategy and overseeing operations, communications programs, fundraising, while managing partnerships with individuals, businesses, foundations, and the Boulder Valley School District. Allison has a Bachelor of Arts degree from Emory University, a master's in urban and regional planning from the University of North Carolina. She is a passionate advocate for tackling our toughest issues through hard work, genuine collaborations, and authentic communications. So welcome, Allison.
Jay, is this what she uses?
That won't work.
I'll have to do
How
it.
about
You
if
have to
I
know
do?
it.
I will, thank you. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, and I know we're in a new
You
space,
can
but
take your mask.
good to be here. Is that
Mhm.
okay with you guys?
Yes.
Thanks for having me, everybody. I'm glad to be here and glad to talk to you a little bit more about our organization and kind of what we've been up to and what's coming for us now that school is back in session and we've got really the third disrupted year of education. Like, we've been thinking about COVID as adults as something that's gone on for 18 months. But when you think about it from the perspective of kids, this is actually the third school year of disruption. And that's a really long time when you're like 8, you know, so that's, I have colleagues whose kids don't remember a time before masks and distancing. And the impacts on this, we know, will be huge on all of us, but certainly on kids who are in schools. And that's really our role, is supporting our local students. So I'll ask you to advance. I've got about 15 slides or so, and want to tell you a little bit about kind of our mission and purpose and what we've been up to, specifically kind of the last year and a half pandemic-wise response and looking forward. So just some quick stats. We are the foundation for the school district, for Boulder Valley School District. We were created almost 40 years ago, in 1983. There are just around 30,000 Bbst students. We can go to the next slide. And I think this has our mission, which you guys are all able to read because of the teachers who taught you how. But really, what it means is that our role is specifically this intersection of what happens inside the school district and leveraging external resources to benefit the schools. So I work really closely with a lot of the leadership of the school district. I actually am cool enough to have a Pbsd badge, which my kids think is the coolest perk of the job.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually, do anything. I do get a discount at Michael's, and and I look official, but that just kind of exemplifies, we've got this really special partnership with the schools and the school district, and a really special relationship. The superintendent sits on our board of directors, as does the head of the teachers union. So we work in really close partnership with them, but really our role is to supplement what they're able to do during the school day and in the school buildings with resources that come from the outside. We can go to the next slide and talk about our values, which is really about being champions for the things you see on there. So we're champions for students, specifically for those who have fewer advantages. I mean, we have one of the largest achievement gaps in the state of Colorado and actually in the country. And what that means is, if you look at something as, test scores don't reflect everything, but if you look at the test scores among our kids of color and our white kids, you'll see a huge gap. If you look at test scores for our low-income kids and our moderate or affluent kids, you'll see a huge gap. And it slices like that on all of the indicators that it shouldn't.
right? It shouldn't matter whether you come from a wealthy family or a white family in terms of how you do in school. But in the Boulder Valley School District, it's actually predictive. And that's what we're up against, is how can we shrink those gaps? Teachers should be able to provide an excellent education to all students. And unfortunately, that's just not what we're seeing when you look at something as basic as test scores. But it repeats itself when you look at who gets in trouble in school and who gets suspended and who gets detention. And so there are a lot of really meaty issues that are playing out in our public schools. And our goal is to be constant champions for the students, always looking towards what's possible in education and kind of thinking of the unconventional and the innovative, always acting with transparency and integrity, champions for change, right? Doing things the same way we've always done them is probably going to yield the same outcome. So we're really there to help spark some catalytic change and with a constant inquiry around equity. And as many organizations have done, I think we've all become more aware, but it's certainly been a focus since I've been at the organization too, that our board reflects our community, that our committees reflect our community, and that we have the hard and awkward conversations about why things are the way they are and who should be in the room and what outcomes who we're acting on behalf of and who's making those decisions. Is it white folks saying, well, this is what our Latino neighbors need? Like that doesn't work, right? So let's make sure that we've got folks of color that are participating and a big part of helping us determine the best possible ways to move things forward. We can go ahead to the next one, which I'll just let you quickly read. But that is our vision statement, and it's actually pretty powerful. So I'll just give you a quick minute. So we deliberately didn't mince words when we wrote that statement together with our board this past year. We rewrote it and spoke specifically about the barriers that I just mentioned to you. Go ahead. So our budget is really constantly invested in meeting the needs of Pbsd students. And I think if we go to the next slide, So no, you can go ahead. That's fine. So generally our work is pretty wide and varied, but falls into these three buckets. So we have programs specifically that are constantly investing in the ways that Pbsd can improve and the ways specifically that external partners can help the district improve what we're doing. So most recently that's focused kind of on two ends of the spectrum. One is the early childhood, kind of what happens before kindergarten. So we just ran a program in partnership with Boulder Housing Partners. We do it every summer. The summer of 2020 was virtual. This summer we got to go back in person, but we bring rising preschoolers who live in public housing to their community centers 2 hours a day, 4 days a week for 5 weeks. And we give them just a taste, a little preschool experience. And these are kids who might otherwise not have any preschool before they arrive for kindergarten. We're looking at expanding that program in the upcoming year, because certainly there are more kids that need, but that's a program that we run every summer. You guys may know there's a school supply drive that we used to do that we continue to provide backpacks filled with school supplies to students across the entire school district, as well as the St. Vrain School District. So about 11,000 backpacks filled with school supplies. So we have programs, those and many others. We also award funds and grants to teachers, grants to school buildings, and grants to support students. So we have an academic support fund that anyone in Boulder Valley School District who has a unique need, and it's one of these one-off things that can't really be solved any other way, this kid would really benefit from this specific thing. If we don't have another way to pay for it, we can come in and provide, whether it's music instrument rentals for the kids who can't afford them, or a specific adaptive technology that they might have one of in the school building, but they need another. Specifically looking at those individual needs that can't be met in other ways, we can step in and provide grants to help make those happen. And then we also manage scholarships to help Pbsd students access post high school, secondary education. Some of them are trades, some of them are college, and in constant inquiry as to how we can do better in terms of preparing students for what's after college or what's after high school. We can go to the next slide. So I think I summarized some of those. We do quite a bit on career education too, and offering leadership experience to students. We've funded all kinds of things around student literacy, professional development for teachers, manipulative materials that help the teachers deliver the curriculum. We do educator grants, scholarships, and then I want to take a couple of minutes and sort of expand on this critical needs piece of things. And I think the next slide is a video that I hope cooperates. It's about 5 minutes long, but I think worth your while and a little diversion from listening to me. So.
We actually have quite a bit of need within Boulder County, even if people outside might have the image of Boulder being entirely a place of wealth or comfort. Close to a quarter of our families, I would say, are socioeconomically working class or living in poverty. There's been a high level of need always, and I think that was really exacerbated when the COVID crisis struck.
It was really stressful. I mean, like a couple weeks ago, I got like a headache, really strong headache, and I went to the hospital and they said it was a stroke. I lose my job, everything closed, the school's closed, so I get a lot of stress.
So yeah, people were scared. They didn't know what was coming. A lot of the people in our school lost their jobs right away. Impact on Education came in saying, how can we help? And the district decided that the first thing to do was for sure to keep the food security going.
I think this was one of those act first, think later situations because there was no time to waste and we had to move really fast.
What do our families need beyond learning needs? For me and a few close colleagues, it shifted from its traditional focus to one about survival.
And we're really fortunate to be in a community with a lot of people who care.
First, I love my job. I love what we do. We do food deliveries every Tuesday and Thursday. No questions asked. You don't even have to be part of the district to get food. So you just show up, you tell them how many bags you need, and they will just put them there for you to grab. That's huge for the families because families sometimes don't want to tell you why they need the food. Some week they do, some week they don't. So we don't ask.
Community liaisons like Bobby said, how can I help? She found the families who needed her most. And she has spent this entire time driving in her car to visit families and bring them the essential supplies that they need. And make sure that every one of those students knows that their school has not forgotten about them and that their school community is still here for them.
Hola, Beth, ¿cómo estás? Fue muy difícil porque pues no lo esperábamos. Luego en ese momento yo me acabo de dar cuenta que estaba embarazada casi hace 2 meses y luego tener 5 niños para mí fue bien difícil.
I'm very worried of schools not opening for the physical, emotional, and mental safety of the kids. It's very hard on parents. I'm a mom and I've struggled with my son too for the home learning.
Fue difícil porque yo no sabía ni qué enseñarle porque mi idioma es español. Entonces no sabía ni qué hacer con él. Pero sí aprendió.
The truth is we have students and families who come to school with very little and are very, very reliant on the services that they get inside these school buildings. I'm really proud to live in a community where people care enough to donate their time and their talent and bring resources to the table and just say, how can I help?
Impact on Education for years has played this crucial role as an equity champion. They partnered with us in another way, buying several $1,000s worth of books that we then distributed. So to be able to partner with Impact on Education and have their funds immediately translate to things like food and books for students to keep them engaged is essential. And without Impact on Education, I don't know where we'd be.
Pues a mí me afectó mucho, ¿sabes? Porque perdí hasta mi trabajo. Pasé 2 meses yo y mi esposo sin trabajo. Y prácticamente todo este tiempo que me ayudaron ustedes, o sea, fue una gran ayuda para mí, para nosotros, pues. El internet que tengo que no es lo mismo que vayan a la escuela, porque la semana son los maestros que a nosotros nos pagan. The only way to change societies, to change futures, and to really help is through education. We know for a fact that a hungry kid can't learn. And so if we keep going the food and we help the families, that takes off a little burden of the pandemic and everything that's going on that is so impactful to all their families. And that's how impact on education is such an important part of this process, because with their money and with their help is that we have been able to keep this going.
In advance for the next slide. Beautiful views we get to enjoy. So thanks for taking a few minutes on that. We made that video last summer, and but I think it does a really nice job of summarizing the way that we stepped in immediately. And you heard quite a bit about food. You didn't hear me talk about that because that's not normally part of our work plan. So what we learned is we needed to be agile and flexible and responsive. And when food was a critical need for students in this community, that's what we were going to do. But I want to share a few other highlights of the ways that we responded as well. So we kind of started from the outset knowing that where we would be needed most when COVID forced the shutdown in March of 2020, and really as it continued through last school year, was in the area of food, home internet, and supplemental instruction, just catching kids up. We knew there would be gaps in what kids learned. So if we go to the next slide, things are happening.
Yeah.
So you can talk about some, is it just the connection?
I think it's the connection because it's fine on the computer.
Yeah, it's weird. It's showing fine to the Zoom people.
Oh, you know what? The Zoom people should get
the TV, so
something.
we'll
That's
see.
okay. Well, I can do my best to recall. So supplemental instruction, we provided kids all the way from 3rd grade through 8th grade. We were providing some tutoring last, really the spring of 2021. So from January through the end of the school year was when we were able to stand up some formalized tutoring for the kids that we knew had missed out. We also paid for ACT, SAT prep classes for high school juniors who needed to take it. It's actually now a graduation requirement. So even though some colleges were waiving that as a requirement to get into college, it's actually a state standard and requirement for graduating from high school. And then we paid for high school students to do what's called credit recovery and course recovery, which ordinarily carries a fee of somewhere between $50 and $300 per class. We knew high school students had a really rough time of it and thought that should not be an extra burden on those families. So we covered those costs so that the students could take their fees.
It's not going to fix this, but.
Okay, can we go to the next one? See if maybe that works. Anyway, okay. I'll have to peek. Oh, meals on the table. So we did talk quite a bit about that. So the Pbsd food distribution, and I don't know if you guys heard about this outside of the school district, but they set up sites at 7 schools and created a drive-through. Anyone can come if you need food, come get it. And so the food services team that's ordinarily serving hot lunch in all of these school buildings every day shifted to essentially becoming like a food bank. And throughout the pandemic, over 2 million, which is a really big number, 2 million meals served. And in addition, we had identified about 500 really high needs families that we tracked throughout that did not have transportation to come get food but needed it. So that's where Fabi was talking about making those deliveries. We had Fabi and about 30 other community liaisons who were bringing food as well as grocery gift cards. We invested tens of thousands of dollars in grocery gift cards. So the other essentials, toilet paper and paper towels and cleaning supplies and diapers, whatever else they might need, were being given directly to the people who needed it most.
Looks like your computer turned off. So maybe it just decided it was done for the day. So it's coming on and off at the login screen here and there. So no big deal. We'll just move forward. I'm going to
Okay.
the off so that there's
If
lots
you
of
can
visual
remember.
distraction.
Super. All right. Well, it's
Spitball,
just
it's trying to have
never,
fun, yeah.
it's just never, you never quite know. Well, and then the other piece of our kind of pandemic recovery was hotspots, home internet, and devices. So thankfully, Pbsd has a lot of computers. In Boulder Valley schools, students from 6th grade and above, and actually this year it's now 5th grade and above, get a school issued Chromebook. There's a fee associated with it for families. We pay that fee for our low income families, but all of our middle and high school kids, most of them already had their own device. So when schools shut down in March of 2020, we just had to solve for all of those elementary school students. But thankfully we have Chrome carts in schools and lots of Chromebooks. So the IT company was able, or Pbsd's IT department was able to go into the schools, retrieve all the Chromebooks, clean them up, and make them usable for people who needed to have one at home. So we were able to get our kids computers pretty quickly. However, not everyone had home internet. There are about 1,200 families who didn't have home internet when the pandemic started, and it's awfully hard to go to remote school when you don't have an internet connection. So we spent quite a bit of time, money, and resources getting those families connected to the internet. And we did so pretty quickly, within those first few months of March and April. But what we found was not all internet, you guys may know, we're going to be learning it today. Not all computers are built the same. Not all the internet is the same. So what we found in the fall of last year was that there were families like, yes, they had internet, but it was a pretty basic level, and they had 3 kids trying to log on to remote video calls at the same time. So their bandwidth just wasn't where it needed to be. We got some additional federal dollars and purchased hotspots at the end of last year and deployed those so that the kids who had kind of low bandwidth at least had enough to stay up with their training. So we did our best to make sure that wasn't an obstacle for kids learning. We also, Pbsd kind of immediately stepped up an emergency childcare program, which in the spring of 2020 was really about emergency workers. So hospital workers that couldn't stay home with their kids, or police officers or firefighters or people who were essential workers who had to continue going, literally didn't have a place for their kid to be. So by April of 2020, Pbsd had these emergency childcare sites for essential workers. And but of course had to pay. Initially they were free, then we had to pay because we were paying. The teachers had to be teaching, and the people in the school buildings were other people who, so we waived those fees for families. We made sure that money was not an obstacle. If the kids didn't have a safe place to be at home, if they couldn't be home by themselves, they had a safe place to go in Pbsd school buildings. We also, this summer, Pbsd was able to go back to in-person summer learning in 2021, but it's a half-day program, which is a barrier for a lot of working families. So we extended and paid for childcare. So the summer school part, Pbsd provides, but they can't provide a full day, but that's where we stepped in. So we provided before and after school care so that wouldn't be an obstacle to a kid participating in summer learning. All right. Are we having fun yet?
You can look here.
Okay, well, I talked
I'm
about
not
that
touching
one.
anything.
No, it's not you. My computer's been,
Next slide.
it's fine.
please.
Go ahead.
Access to remote
Yep.
learning.
Next one.
Okay.
Um,
Provided school supplies.
Yeah, we talked about fancy calculators. We did that too. We do that program every year, but in March of 2020, we actually went into our supplies and pulled out all of the excess that we had, and we were able to pull 3,000 kits of home learning materials together. So in addition to kind of the kids getting computers and getting internet, we also made sure that they had they had basic school supplies. Ari in the video talked about the books that we purchased. We also did a book drive at the end of last winter over the holidays and got tons and tons of books out to kids in need. So that was, obviously reading is core to learning. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about what's kind of in store this year. And I want to make sure that you guys have time for any questions. So I mentioned our summer shuffle program, which is the early childhood. We are working on a kindergarten bridge program for the upcoming year, constantly thinking about how we can do better to prepare kids for college and careers. And those conversations were in full swing pre-pandemic, frankly, just kind of were iced a little bit the past year and a half, but we're reviving them and talking about how the district can do better. I mean, the careers of the future are not exactly the same as the ones of the past, and we just have to think differently about how we're preparing our kids, as well as continuing to work on student leadership programs, the academic supports I mentioned, and a whole bunch of supplemental instruction. It's still a need. Kids, there are still gaps between where they should be and what they've been able to gather. So I think just maybe, a quick slide about how to keep up with us. So this looks really messy, but it's really just, these are our social media handles, our website's right in the middle. We do have a blog and we post about once a week what we're up to and then highlight those in our newsletter. So our website is a great resource. Encourage you to sign up for the newsletter. We really don't send, we send them about once or twice a month, but it just enables you to keep up with what we're doing. And I think the next one is about volunteering, because you guys, like to help the community. I know about Rotarians. So ongoing as well as occasional volunteer opportunities. Right now, Pbsd is still not allowing volunteers or visitors in school buildings until at least October 1st. I'm really hopeful and working really hard to find ways to allow volunteers to come in starting in October, because we just need extra help. The teachers, as you guys know, we hear about kind of healthcare worker burnout, educator burnout is very, very real. I would love to tell you that teachers came back like super raring to go, and some did, but like it's been a real drain, and not being able to have extra bodies in the building to help them out, to pull kids out for small reading groups, which are great things for volunteers to do, I think is continuing to make it really tricky for them. So I'm really hopeful we'll be able to get volunteers back to school buildings as well. So we have volunteer orientations every few months. I put our next date on there. You're not required to do that, but to volunteer with us, but it's a great way to just kind of get the high level overview of what it means to be an impact and education volunteer. And I think that's probably where I turn over to you guys for some questions. So.
I'm going to say a couple things, and I don't mean to be viewed as negative. But I've been very close to this issue all my life. Both my parents taught for Boulder Valley School District, 50, 60 years ago when I was a boy. And I view this as a systemic problem. The city or a group of people or community should place at the very top of the pinnacle of the education of their children. And they don't. They just don't. When Mr. Anderson was in here about 2 years ago, I think it was, the current superintendent, I asked him what percentage of the teachers live in Boulder. He said 5. And then we discussed why. We know why. But that's an issue. I mean, there's a gap there, a huge gap, just in our educators with the rest of society in the city. And it's ugly all across the country. But the one we're most familiar with is our own. But that hasn't changed forever. My parents couldn't qualify for a mortgage with 2 income, as a family back in 1960. So I see what you're doing, and I think it's really good. Those are hard things you can take care of. But I think the bigger issue really lies with the community. If the community isn't going to support this issue, the one that really ought to be at the pinnacle of the things that the community supports, how do you fix that?
Well, I tell people all the time, especially folks who don't live in Colorado, I wish I didn't have to do this job. I wish we weren't needed. Yeah. I mean, every nonprofit should be in that place where you're trying to work towards a reality where you don't need to exist. And when I tell some folks, in other parts of the country, my closest friend lives in Lexington, Massachusetts. They don't need school foundations in Lexington, Massachusetts. They pay much higher property taxes than we do, but their public schools are funded excellently. Colorado, for as educated as we are as a state, we are, depending on which poll you look at, either 48th or 49th in per pupil funding as a state. So Boulder Valley, we are certainly far better. We pay actually one of the best in the state. We pay our teachers best. It's still not enough to afford to live here. But we compensate our teachers, and as a result, we can attract the very best. And it's still not enough, right? I mean, we are making up for, so all that we fund locally, and we're kind of maxed out under paper what we can locally support, and it's still a fraction of what other peer communities, rather than comparing ourselves. I mean, it's easy to compare ourselves to other districts in Colorado, but if you look at other kind of college towns, you look at where Ann Arbor, University of Michigan and Ann Arbor, Michigan, and what they're dealing with and what their public schools, the way that they're funded, even just do a per pupil analysis, and it's like 50% more per kid times 30,000 kids. So we're desperately and dreadfully under-resourced. And you may have heard in my bio, my master's is in urban and regional planning, not education. I got into this issue because I moved back here with my kids. They were born in Colorado. We moved to North Carolina for 8 years. When I came back and they started 3rd grade, having been in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Public Schools, which is the 5th largest school district in the country. It is a huge urban school district with tons of poverty and tons of issues. And they have better resources there than they did at Pbsd. There wasn't a school nurse. Oh, if you get sick on a Tuesday or Thursday before 1 p.m., then there's somebody. Otherwise, the school secretary is going to just call and tell me to come get you. Because I mean, there's no the level of what we can provide to our kids just isn't where it should be. So 100%.
Yeah, I have the same passion. I appreciate that.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, years ago, I heard that only 39% of Colorado students go to college statewide. Is that still true? Because that's horrible.
I don't know what the statewide numbers are. I do know that a lot of our Boulder Valley kids do go off to college, and a lot of them don't finish. Or they're not employed post-college. And so when we talk about changing college and career readiness, I think Boulder Valley has been a really good school district for, I'm going to be very frank with you guys, we've been good at sending affluent white kids to good colleges. That's what we've been good at. And you can stake a lot of your reputation on being good at sending privileged kids off to privileged colleges, but I don't think that's the answer. And it's not enough anymore. Like when I went to college, the day I got in to Emory, thanks for calling out my alma mater, my parents did a victory lap. Like their job was done. I was set. They're like, she's good. We did our job. And that's just not the case anymore. Just getting into a school, even graduating with a 4-year degree, if you have no clue what you want to do and no real skills and no connections, you're not making it. So we owe it to our kids to really prepare them for a very different future where they're not going to go to one job and stay there for 30 years, right? They're going to bounce around more. They're going to have to be a little scrappy. They're going to need some entrepreneurship skills. They're going to need a whole different set of skills and critical thinking and just different attributes, I think, than what we've been historically providing.
Could I just do one more thing?
Yeah.
And you probably know this, but most of the kids in jails are dyslexic and very, very smart. And that's the problem. Well, how have you been handling that through the Zoom?
I'm so glad you asked that. Actually, one of my daughters has dyslexia, which was not diagnosed until 5th grade after we were like, it's really hard for her. So we actually, I'm really proud and thank you for asking. So we have a kindergarten pilot now. We're actually screening every kid in kindergarten in Boulder Valley schools for dyslexia. It's not a diagnosis, but it's a screening. And we've changed the curriculum. Part of what happened is there are, and I already admitted my background is not education. I'm a nonprofit manager, but there are 2 ways to teach literacy. There's a whole language approach to literacy and there's a phonics-based approach to literacy. If you teach a phonics-based approach, that helps everybody. It helps the kids with dyslexia can learn it and the typical kids can learn it. If you teach a whole language approach, that works really well for someone without dyslexia, but for a kid with dyslexia like mine and many others, it is really hard. What we learned in 5th grade with my daughter, she was having like behavioral meltdowns, not at school. She saved those for us at home. And what we realized is it was because she had committed to memory in her frontal lobe every word that she knew how to read. She did not actually know how to sound out a word. She was so overloaded by memorizing every word, and she was a reader, avid reader. and she could only read because she had committed every word to memory. So she had no more capacity to like be a stable human because she had spent her day just trying to remember all of these words. Pbsd and many schools, it kind of, like things in education do, this was in vogue and then that's in vogue. Well, now we're back to a phonics-based program. So that part is great. We also, though, funded the training for over 45 educators. We created a literacy fund a few years ago when we found out that there was this gap between teachers who knew how to teach this phonics-based thing that we know works versus those who were brought up and changed and trained in this whole language approach. So we took all of those interventionists who didn't have the training they needed, and in one summer we got them all trained. It was a 2-week pretty intensive training, but we took care of that so that every single school has somebody who's trained to help the kids who with dyslexia not feel like failures, which is what ends up happening. The reason they commit crimes is because they feel like they're not smart. And if they're anything like my kid, they're actually doubly smart. Their brains are just wired differently. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, so I was gonna ask real quick, it sounds like a lot of your programs are connected to helping and improving situations for people who have less resources available to them. Have you tapped Americorps Vista as a program for Pbsd or for your organization as a foundation?
Great question. We have not as a foundation, and I'm not sure that Pbsd has fully tapped into it too. What I've learned now in 3 years in the job is that 3.5, I guess, there are some barriers in place. But I know that other peer foundations, I Have a Dream has Vistas who work with them, and so they've figured out ways to do it. And I think that's exactly, we need those kinds of resources as well. So haven't, but.
Yeah, I feel like it might be a great way to bring back the lesser underemployed students who graduated, went to college and need a job. Because then you can also give them that platform to take on federal roles here in Colorado. We have so many federal jobs to take on after Americorps.
I love it. My husband was in Americorps Vista, one of the first ones actually, so super cool. Other questions or input ideas?
All right, well, we hit our time, so thank you so much, Allison. The token of appreciation, we gave you the whole world.
I love it.
So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
And this is Wednesday's Rotary. All right, hi, Josh.
Well, you both did it. Yeah. Hi, it's great having you. Yeah, anytime. You're always welcome here. I feel like this space is great for you in Clyde, because Clyde gets all the stress. Yeah, you heard me say your name. Look at that stretch. Is it time to get up?